It's here. ABC TV invites your whole family to enjoy the exciting new nighttime fun frolic of Hollywood's all-time favorites. Don't miss the Bugs Bunny Show. Yes, everybody laughs at that carrot-eating character and his crazy pal, Daffy Duck, the Big Dame Hunter, Pepe Le Pew, Yosemite Sam.
If you've watched any of my videos before, you know that I blame the death of quality traditional animation on television. In the mid-50s, when television became a household thing, old theatrical shorts were showcased on local and national channels, and very quickly, animation found a permanent home on TV and our living rooms. Before too long, the demand for new animation came about right around the time that all the movie studios in Hollywood closed their animation departments for good. But here's the rub. TV didn't, and by all accounts, still really does not have even a quarter of the budget that movie studios do for animation, so corner cutting was rampant for almost 30 years. Before limited animation became sophisticated with shows like Ren and Stimpy, the vast majority of everything that was animated on TV didn't look good and hardly moved. By and large, you need money to make a good animated show. In the early 60s, the best studio for making quality stuff on a budget was Hanna-Barbera, and by 1964, having only done cartoony stuff like Yogi Bear and the Flintstones, they endeavored to try a completely different style and tone with Jonny Quest. It's pretty damn good, even if you don't take into consideration how graphically pleasing it is. This show feels like an adaptation of a comic book that never existed. The creator, Doug Wildey, had worked as a comic book illustrator, which accounted for the tone and look of the show. It was very influential, yet no other show that was drawn by hand ever attempted to repeat that style, and that's because the inking took twice as long as most shows. I mean, just look at those outlines. I mean, my God. That's a tough job to do for the still graphic panels of a comic book. Think of how much harder a job it is for animation. Another way a lot of studios at the time cut costs was they got rid of inking altogether and instead just Xeroxed the cleaned up pencil animation onto cells, and from there, it was off to the paint department. Basically, there was no ink and paint department after 1970. Just paint. Painting xerographed cells was a technique that Disney started in the early 60s to replace inking, and they've kept it up ever since. Some folks believe they brought inking back for the animated films of the 90s, I guess because the films hadn't looked that good for almost 30 years. But by the time they did The Little Mermaid, they were able to photograph the pencil lines in colors other than just black. That's kind of why the movie just before Mermaid, Oliver and Company, looks very similar to 101 Dalmatians, the first film to use the process, not to mention every other animated film they released in between that time. But the xerographing of pencil lines began with Dalmatians in '61, whereas the 1964 produced Jonny Quest, in an effort to pay homage to serial comic books, made the effort to ink its cells, and in a style that required artistry and time. But a number of you have asked me, what cartoons do I like that are modern? And really, I do keep my eyes peeled and try to watch as much new stuff as I can. For instance, I'm really loving me some Augie and the Cockroaches right now. But for the most part, my love of animation isn't really episodic. I like cartoons. I'm not a fan, really, of animated TV shows as much. I tried to make a list of my top 5 favorite cartoons, and by that I mean standalone animated shorts, made by WB after the studio closed in '69. But it was kind of a grim list. That is, unless you were to count the list's number 1 pick. My favorite, Toby Danger. Toby Danger was on the first season of Freakazoid, which, yes, I know that's an episodic show, but this cartoon didn't reference anything on the show. The show never made mention of it or anything else in it for the rest of the series, thus making it completely standalone, and it was a near-perfect parody of Jonny Quest. And even if you'd never seen Jonny Quest, you instantly fell in love with the characters, because even though you'd seen them before, they were new. Archetypes, perhaps, but realized characters, certainly. Chuck Jones said that Tex Avery taught them all, albeit by example, that you must love what you parody. And it's clear in watching this cartoon that the people that made it love Jonny Quest.
They gripped your attention, they held your attention.
Now, comparatively to the other 4 shorts on this list that I would later discard, I wrote so much about this Toby Danger cartoon, praising it and praising it, till eventually I realized I should just go for broke and make the whole video about this cartoon, this one brilliant and forgotten cartoon. So here it is, without any further ado, my review of what I consider to be the single best traditionally animated standalone cartoon short produced at Warner's post the 1969 shutdown. It's Toby Danger in Doomsday Bet. What's up, Dax and Dackets? Trevor Thompson, the self-appointed Looney Tunes critic here, and today we're taking a look at a single cartoon from an early episode of Freakazoid, and we'll be interviewing the person behind it. And if you think it's a handy coincidence that the Nostalgia Critic also recently did a video about Freakazoid where he interviewed the people behind it, well, then you truly don't know what the definition of handy is.
I do.
Quiet, we're getting to you.
I know what it means.
Anyway, folks, I've known of the genius of this cartoon for a very long time. This one goes back a long way with me, and also with the Ferris Wheelhouse video wrangler, Sean McBee. Some of you know who he is. He's guested on a couple of these commentaries with me, usually the first of the month. You know how the song goes? It's the first of the month. That's how you know. It's going to be a guest commentary. It's the first of the month. Someone else to talk, yeah. You don't like my song? We grew up together in Sarasota, Florida, and we're both diehard fans of the classic Warner shorts. One September in high school, this would have been 1995, he had slept over the Saturday night before, mainly because the Sunday previous we'd watched this new show called Freakazoid, and loved it. We loved this show so much that we knew we wanted to watch the next episode, but we had to continue with the Saturday sleepovers to ensure that we could keep watching because the WB channel had scheduled this hot new show on Sunday, not Saturday morning, and at the crack of Yeah. I wonder how many of you die-hard Freakazoid fans from back in the day remember that. The show, when it premiered on a Sunday at 6 in the morning. Sunday. 6. I mean, that's how you know you have a pretty die-hard fan base. We're juniors in high school at this point. We don't want to get up early on a Sunday, but we did, and continued to watch the show religiously. But for me, personally, it never got better than that second episode of Freakazoid. And nothing on that second episode was ever better than Toby Danger. Now, when Sean and I watched Toby Danger for the very first time that Sunday morning in 1995, I had only heard of Jonny Quest and maybe only seen clips, which is precisely why it's so strange that this short works as a parody, a single episode of a proper comedy adventure series, and a style study. I guess by so closely parodying a formula of a show that engaged its audience, the audience of this cartoon was engaged by default? I don't know. So let's figure out what happens in this cartoon. The cartoon begins with a Toby Danger intro, and one that for years I believed was a sure sign that it would eventually spin off into its own series, much like Pinky and the Brain had with Animaniacs. This would-be series' singular episode, Doomsday Bet, begins in the desert at Dr. Danger's semiconductor testing lab. An intern at the lab increases the power of the world's largest semiconductor suddenly, even when told that Dr. Danger said not to do that.
Careful, intern. Dr. Danger said not to increase the world's largest semiconductor's power suddenly.
I love that he's right next to a gigantic master switch with an even bigger master switch sign. So the semiconductor is awakened and leaves to wreak havoc on Las Vegas. So the lab men call Dr. Danger, who is nowhere to be found. That's because he's with his son Toby and the rest of the crew that we met in the intro on his flying island. They land on Lake Mead and go for a ride on his anti-gravity sidewalk slabs when Sandra notices the semiconductor testing lab is dilapidated.
You've got a good head on your shoulders, Sandra. Maybe someday you'll be a scientist, just like me.
Look at that awful, twisted, smoldering wreckage ahead!
That's my semiconductor testing lab.
Which is weird when you consider that it was the scientists who contacted Dr. Danger, only for him to show up whilst taking a flying sidewalk ride of an evening. Yeah, as one does. This scene has 2 lines in it back to back that I just love. When they walk through the lab, which is now devoid of any scientists, injured or otherwise, they're just alone now, Dash makes a joke about how they must have had one heck of an office party. Then Dr. Danger says this.
Or one clever saboteur.
Neato!
What's a saboteur, Pop?
I say this line conversationally to this day. Anytime I think something is cool enough to be deemed neat, I'll say, Neato! What's a saboteur, Pop? I don't know why, man. It's a line from this cartoon that has always stuck with me. And the other line comes right after it. It's when Dr. Danger reveals who the saboteur is.
I knew it. It's some guy in a helmet.
Correct, Dash.
By the way, take a look at that. Zoom in. Dr. Danger invented the Apple iPhone. Or the pineapple iPhone. And if it's truly pineapple, then I am certain that it will taste delicious on a pizza. Solidarity. And if you have a problem with it, that's fine. More pineapple pizza for me and my best friend Drake.
But I enjoy pineapple on pizza, though. I don't mind it.
So the basic plot is that while Dr. Danger preps the security system, in the form of a giant laser gun, to prevent the Ring-a-Ding Bummer Hotel from getting scorched like every other building in Vegas, Toby tries to sneak into the Ring-a-Ding Casino and meet Keno girls.
You know the rules, kid. No minors in the casino.
I'll never meet a Keno girl.
His second attempt at this gets him thrown in actual jail, with a joke that didn't land when it would have made sense, and now, some 20 plus years later, makes even less sense. But here's what happens, and here's what the joke is. Toby's dressed as a Crip, and that's why he's arrested. Apparently, according to this article that was published when the cartoon was made, both the Bloods and the Crips were hitting up casinos on the Vegas Strip back then. So, I don't know, who knew, right? It's probably the only miss in the whole cartoon, which quickly redeems itself when Sandra breaks Toby out of jail, stopping only to listen for phantom toilet flushes.
Shh, I'm working on it.
She runs interference, while Dash, as the muscle of the group, throws a barrel at these heathen monkeys. This, of course, works out great, and they break Toby out, just before the toilet from before crashes through the roof. Getting back to the laser beam, the gang reunite just in time to see Dr. Sin piloting the semiconductor and heading closer to the Ring-a-Ding. Dr. Danger gives the order to, holy crap, is that Frank Sinatra? To divert any non-essential power so the security gun can work more better. This leads to several legit funny gags.
Sorry.
Still more power!
Oh woman, don't you treat me so bad. You're the meanest old woman that I ever did have.
So the power is diverted, but it doesn't seem to help. That is, of course, until Dash goes old-fashioned with it.
Can nothing stop this thing?
Just let me throw a barrel at it.
Dash, no!
barrel expertly thrown, he gets up there and gives Dr. Sin quite the sound thrashing. This is yet another great nod to Jonny Quest, a show that maybe didn't always have the most believable fight scenes. Dr. Danger lands a shot with his super nifty science laser and, knowing that it's about to get ugly, makes sure the kids are safe.
Gangway! She's about to blow!
The barrel he threw explodes beer everywhere, and Dash uses this as a distraction, kicking Dr. Chin in the sin...
Wait a minute. Strike that. Reverse it.
Kicking Dr. Sin in the chin, causing him to plummet to his death. Presumably. I don't know. That's actually the last that we see of him, so... But I'm okay with that, because it's kind of the thing that you would see were this an actual series, week after week. You would see this kind of thing. They would defeat him, but he would escape at the last minute before the cops can apprehend him. And then, 4 episodes later, he shows up masquerading in Korea as a geisha who enjoys hikes, analingus, and theater. The usual sitcom cliches. Slitshays, I call them. Cut. Dr. Sin's questionable death notwithstanding, the semiconductor is now decapitated and it explodes, raining debris everywhere. And if it rains, what do, kids? You get an umbrella.
You can stand under my umbrella.
I'd call your latest invention a flaming success, Doctor.
I tried, Dash. To succeed would take more resources than planet Earth can supply me.
So the cartoon ends with the typical Hanna-Barbera-style group laugh, and then a hint of realism is thrown in.
I was gonna go see Siegfried and Roy tonight.
So now that I've told you what and who Toby Danger is, I feel I should tell you what and who Tom Minton is. This great cartoon was written by Tom Minton, one of the few people who worked in television animation that, when the chance to make art that was, in my opinion, worthy of the original Looney Tunes, took this extremely rare opportunity that had presented itself and ran well with it.
And people say, why do you want to work with Ralph? He's crazy. He does X-rated pictures. Because he just might do something good.
He worked in some capacity, whether in the art department, by association.
I don't know. It's just something that it clicks. You know it when you see it. Nothing else like it.
Or even as a writer and producer with almost every good cartoon and animated series that came out in the last 40 years. That can't be a coincidence. Tom started his career at the bottom, and while that's true of most people, in his case it's more literal than anything else, because the bottom, as in of the barrel, is Filmation. He started at stupid f***ing Filmation as a cell painter, and after a few years made it to the storyboard department. His first crack at making quality cartoons on TV was as a writer and storyboard artist on Ralph Bakshi's Mighty Mouse.
The craziest mind was Tom Minton. He was sort of our head writer, and he was the seasoned guy.
Tom is an anarchist, basically. He was the craziest one of all of us, really. He was just a little older, and he hit it better.
Well, first of all, Tom Minton. If you ever spoke to Tom Minton, who comes from Arkansas or Kansas or somewhere, Dakota, somewhere obscene, he's the strangest guy in the world. He wrote some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen. His anger, his take on the world. I used to talk a lot to Tom, and how he felt about various foolishness of human beings, and how people act, and sort of the life cycle of idiocy that hangs on.
So Tom, I really need a gag for this thing.
Hey buddy, could you spare a few one-liners? How about a pun, mister? A play on words? Anybody got a gag? Hasn't anybody got a sense of humor?
A few years later, he's at Warner Brothers on the ground floor at Tiny Toon Adventures, writing and storyboarding on Animaniacs, and then finally as a producer on the Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries and Duck Dodgers. In fact, Tom's responsible for the brain of Pinky and the Brain. Before Maurice LaMarche was cast to do the voice, a variation on his Orson Welles impression, which is really all that mine is, the only real-life imitation within the character of Brain was Minton, not Welles.
So I look at the Brain, they give me the model sheet. I'm the first audition on the first day of auditions, and I have the very first slot. And I get in there, I look at the Brain, it's the first thing they give me, and I go, oh, they've drawn me Orson Welles. They're giving me my own show, because I have an ego the size of Toronto. They based it on a guy named Tom Minton. And Tom, who's become a friend, but I did not know him yet, Tom is a dizzy talk like this. He's a very fast talking guy, and he's very, very, everything, but he's a brilliant guy. He's very, very real, but he talks like this in a flat monotone, very, very quickly, and so. And if I'd met Tom, I would have done Tom, and I would have lost the job, and they would have gone the rest of the day looking for the Brain. But they cast me right on the spot.
The other trait of Brain's that people often attribute to LaMarche's Welles impression, but that is actually a trait of Tom's, is the signature yes. By now, many people are aware that LaMarche learned to do Welles by memorizing the, as it's known, Frozen Peas outtakes, and when one compares the original recording to Maurice's performance, it becomes seemingly obvious where the yes comes from.
Well, we want to be out of that snowy field.
But I was out. We were onto a can of peas, a big dish of peas when I said in July.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, always. I'm always past that.
You are?
Yes.
When I was out, we were onto a can of peas, a big dish of peas when I said in July.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, always. I'm always past that.
You are?
Yes.
Seeing multiple yeses in the script was likely more reason for LaMarche to think they wanted an Orson voice from him, but the Brain's yeses were actually Tom's. Sometimes, when exasperated, Tom would have a fairly laconic yes, which would stand out amidst his usual rapid-fire pace. This is a man who did not suffer fools well, so naturally, Brain would exasperatedly say yes or yes when dealing with Pinky, at least in the conceptual stage. Mr. Minton is also a fan of Jonny Quest, as we get to see in this DVD bonus featurette, Jonny Quest, Adventures in Animation.
Most artists don't particularly care for drawing things that are really, really detailed. Now to Doug, that was Dreamsville. That was great. He liked doing that sort of thing.
Currently, Tom is retired, yet his work is still being seen by young people today. His last writing job was the script Raising Your Spirits for Wabbit. This would have been the show's first incarnation before the studio changed the name of the show and nothing else. Anyway, Tom granted me an interview, but doing one on camera wasn't possible, so he said he would answer questions about the cartoon via email, which is fine. I mean, he's a guest and working for free, so he should be comfortable, but it's just not visually interesting, for a video review, for this interview, for me to just be like, and then I said to Tom, blah, 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 and then he said, blah, 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 blah. So here's what we're going to do. I have on my note cards here all of the questions that I asked him in the email interview, and Manx, there he is. All right. Get your cards. You got your cards there?
Yeah, I got them right here, man. There's a lot of them, though. This dude types like he talks. 1 million words a minute. The man definitely wrote for a living. I'm guessing he probably got paid by the word.
All right, shut up. So, I'm me, with the questions, and Manx here.
That's me.
We'll be reading Tom's responses. He will not be acting as Tom, just reading Tom's responses, and he is not going to improvise.
Yeah, no, who needs improv? What is this, Freakazoid?
If only. So, we'll get on with this interview now. And by now, I mean right after these words.
And now, these messages.
Hey everybody, Trevor here, and I hope you're enjoying this latest Looney Tunes Critic Review, but I just wanted to take a second to make you aware of one of my go-tos for research when making these videos, animationresources.org. Growing up, I researched Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies ad nauseum, saving my allowance to buy any books I could find about those cartoons, and about 60 to 70% of the reviews and commentaries come just from the knowledge acquired from those books, stored deep in the recesses of my brain. Now, sometimes I'll go online to find exact dates and things like that, but when I need to do some real deep research for stuff that isn't well known, I go to Animation Resources. I mean, just look at this site. Packed to the brim with info, colorful, easy to navigate. And one of the hardest things to do when I'm here is to stay on topic, actually. I mean, very often I'll see something else and then explore and read about that for the next 15 minutes. And yes, I know there are other sources online, but those are websites. Animation Resources is people. And more to the point, people who preserve classic animation that would, even under studio care, otherwise perish. They preserve materials, you guys, film prints, drawings, cells. They even have animation classes for people who want to learn the traditional style without going to college. I mean, it's no wonder Ralph Bakshi called it a master's degree in creativity right at your fingertips. Now, I should mention, I'm not getting paid to promote these guys, but rather hoping to ingratiate myself to them. They need support from people like us because they lost their funding a few years ago, and me personally, I can't make a donation because I'm broke as a joke. If you love my reviews and Saturday morning commentaries, you should know that I owe a lot to Animation Resources, as do a great many of us enthusiasts. So if you have time today, check out the website, and if you're so inclined, make a donation, however small. Hell, send them a letter. That's support too. They're applying for grants and sponsorships, and letters from animation fans who use the site would legitimately help. Future sponsors need to see stuff like that. So yeah, if you like my videos, you'll probably love this site. Animation Resources, the one place to go for your animation resources. Didn't really think that through. So go to animationresources.org today and tell them the Looney Tunes critic sent you.